Alright, so in my recent video going off on the state of the world, which, is definitely in keeping with my usual round of content, one of you guys in the comments suggested that I get back to Owl House reviews. Since I was talking about how, I wanted to start bringing you guys content again. And that is a terrific idea, because the Owl House is a really great show. And I keep forgetting that I've only talked about, 3 episodes of it so far on the channel. 4 now. So, step in the right direction. And today we're talking about, I think, genuinely one of the best episodes of the entire series so far, The Intruder, which is, as I mentioned, the 4th episode of the first season. And this is going to be a hard one to talk about, because I usually include something of a recap in my reviews, and yet, a lot of the various episodes of various things that I have covered on this show, this is kind of a horror-y sort of episode. So a lot of the enjoyment of it comes from the vibe of it. And there's even a twist here which really helps amp up that vibe. So I'm going to warn you guys right now, I am going to spoil the twist. I'm going to talk about the twist in this video. So if you haven't watched the show yet and you think you might want to, you should watch this episode first. It's not going to kill your enjoyment of the whole show or anything. It's not like this is a season finale or even a mid-season finale episode. So it's not like a season finale or a mid-season finale twist. I will say, though, going back and rewatching this episode and really paying attention to how its elements fit together, this is the kind of episode that a lot of shows might have slotted in as a mid-season or a season finale. And yet this is just episode 4. This is treated like a regular world-building episode, and I love that because it's so good. And yet, I think the show continues to overall get better. I still think this is a very, very good episode. An example of this shows genuine high quality. But I do think the show overall continues to build on this and get better as a whole. So if you want my spoiler-free review of the episode, it's very good. It's one of my favorites, actually, especially after having gone back and rewatched it and really paid attention. If you guys want a little more meat on the bones of your review, though, here we go. The episode starts out with Luz getting a lesson from King about demons, because he thinks of himself as the king of demons. Though this episode makes it kind of clear that even he kind of doesn't have much experience with demons. He's more of a book-learned demon king, which I find very, very interesting. It almost treats his interest in his kind as a hobby, which is a little weird, but at the same time it makes for an interesting relationship dynamic in this episode itself, because Luz isn't super interested in learning about demons from him. She's playing along because she likes him, they're friends, but she's far more interested in magic, and it becomes clear early on that the only reason she's really humoring him is because Ida isn't around right now. She's out doing Ida things. And so even as King is talking about the Snaggleback, apparently the most dangerous of all demons, Luz is treating this thing like it's no big deal, belittling the whole thing, which is actually interesting because that actually ends up being foreshadowing for later in the episode, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Then it starts to rain. Luz goes outside and we get some world building, which also ends up contributing to the plot. The rain here is boiling rain, which can kill you and also damage property. So Ida has to run home, pull Luz back inside out of the rain, and then put up a shield around the house to keep the boiling rain out, which traps everyone inside, which is important because I mentioned this is sort of a horror-ish episode. And then immediately Luz starts pestering Ida for lessons in magic. They also question why she's called the Owl Lady, which is important in the episode, but it's not really necessary to talk about it. But Luz starts pressuring Ida for a lesson in magic, and Ida shows her that witches draw a circle and call upon the magic bile located in the bile sac attached to their heart to project magic out into the world, to project magic symbols out into the world. We don't know that yet. We don't specifically know that it's a symbol yet. We just see the circle itself, which is cool. I always liked sigil magic. I think sigil magic is pretty cool. And we find out later in the episode that the way I see it, I don't know if this is exactly what's happening, but the way I see it, she's kind of imagining the symbol into existence and then putting the circle around it. And so we see the symbol for just a split second. Like, I don't think she's consciously imagining the symbol. I think she's imagining the effect, and then that's creating the symbol back. And that's kind of working backwards to create the symbol there inside the circle as she draws it. But the point stands, she's just drawing the circle around the symbol to finish off the spell. And it's thanks to Luz taking video of it and then being able to go through the video frame by frame later that we're able to see that the symbol does flash there for an imperceptible second. It's all very cool, and like, they show us a lot of this. But they don't actually explain it to us. They don't like sit there and exposit about it in length. We have to put this together for ourselves, and we can draw our own conclusions as to what the exact specifics of it are. But since the exact specifics don't actually matter, really, it's fun. It's a fun little addition to the show, if that makes sense. It's something worth theorizing about, but not something that is so ground-shaking that you feel like you have to get your theory right. It's something for the fandom to discuss. It's something that they clearly included in here and left a little vague because they wanted their fandom to discuss it. And I really like that. I really appreciate stuff like that. The problem is Luz is not a witch from the Boiling Isles. She doesn't have a bile sac attached to her heart that fuels her magic. So she can't do magic. Just straight up. She can't be a witch. Or can she? And that's the point of the episode. In the end, that's the point of the episode. This is a trapped in a house with a monster kind of episode. But really the point of the episode is to show that Luz has her own way of doing magic, which fits so well because she is the kind of character who likes to find her own way of doing things in general. And what's great about this episode, and what's great about the twist that we get later, is that at first when the creature shows up and defeats Hootie, which is interesting, and I think this is the one misstep in the episode, because we don't get to see how dangerous Hootie is for a little while still, so it doesn't leave as big an impact on us seeing him get knocked down as the door gets knocked down and being taken out so easily. That's beside the point. This creature shows up and defeats Hootie, and we only see its silhouette and shadow, and it looks like the Snaggleback. And so your first thought is, Luz not paying attention to that lesson about the Snaggleback earlier is going to in some way come into play. But it doesn't, because this is all a misdirect. Because, and this is the big spoiler, it turns out, as was foreshadowed by Luz not taking the Snaggleback lesson seriously, the Snaggleback is a big softy, and the creature is actually Ida. The reason that she's called the Owl Lady is because she turns into a four-legged owl creature, as per a curse, every so often, unless she takes a potion to keep the curse at bay. And I think, I'm trying to remember the specifics of it, I think later we find out that the potion just artificially reinflates her level of available magic. So like that amount of available bile within her body, because it's actually her magic that keeps the curse at bay. But I could be wrong about that. We'll see as I'm going back to rewatch these again. And like initially they had thought, Luz and King had thought that the potion was how Ida got her magic, because neither one of them really understands the mechanics of magic, and they're looking for a way for Luz to be able to do magic. And we never see Luz actually drink the potion, and if my theory about it is right, I'm curious to see if she drank it, would she be able to do traditional Boiling Isle witch magic? I don't know. I wonder if they didn't allow her to drink it here, in part because they didn't want to confirm that yet. So that's something worth thinking about. But anyway, the rest of the episode, we're about halfway through the episode at this point. The rest of the episode is Luz and King, and then later just King for a while, avoiding what we still think is the Snaggleback. It's really good, really atmospheric, cool, trapped in the house with a monster kind of stuff. You know, I love that kid-friendly horror stuff that shows up in shows like this from time to time, so obviously I was going to enjoy this. But then the twist happens, and it's absolutely fantastic. But what's even better is that, and it makes sense that this is the case, because this is the first episode where the dynamic between Luz and King has to carry the whole thing. The character stuff between Luz and King here is the best. It's the best part of the whole episode, Because earlier on, Luz tries to enlist King's help in finding a way to do magic, even though she doesn't have that witch bile. This is after she's accidentally knocked Ida out, so Ida can't help her anymore right now. And King wants to continue his lesson. He wants to continue sharing his interest with her. But when she explains why she wants to be a witch, that she wants something that will make her special because she never felt like there was anything special about her back home, King understands, and he agrees to help her out on the condition that he's allowed to finish his lesson later. And you could tell it's because he just wants other people to appreciate him, the same way Luz wants others to appreciate her. And so later on, as they're hiding from Ida, Luz realizes this too, and at the same time realizes that the knowledge that he has can actually help them in this situation. They have a little bonding moment, and then he uses his knowledge of demons and their anatomy to work out what might be Owlbeast Ida's weakness, that being that she has big black eyes, therefore her eye is basically all pupil, and therefore light can harm her. And it just so happens that a light spell is the same spell that Ida tried to teach Luz earlier, so that's the spell that they actually have the symbol for on Luz's phone, and Luz is able to work out immediately that the size of the circle determines the size of the spell, so she draws a really big light spell and is able to produce enough light to knock Ida out again, and now the characters are able to give her her potion and help her to recover from the curse, at least for the time being. There's even a great mystery hook here at the end when we learn that Ida still doesn't know how Luz is doing this, even though she has the full symbols, which is very cool. And that's all fantastic. It's all great. Every element of the episode comes together perfectly, even in some ways which entirely subvert expectations and give us some really solid gags during the more tense horror moments. And yet they still manage to sneak something else cool in the end, a little bit of dialogue from Ida, marking this curse thing as an explicit reference to chronic illness, even managing to include a little bit of commentary about how there can be a stigma attached to certain chronic illnesses, but that in the end, they're nothing to be ashamed of. And I think that's cool. It's a little tacked on, and as far as I remember, it doesn't really get addressed often from this point forward, but it's still a neat thing to stick in there, because the episode had been going on and on earlier on about how cool and, for lack of a better term, flawless Ida was, and now we find out that there's this thing about her that even she doesn't like. Not a thing that's necessarily bad, but just something that she would rather not have to deal with. And it creates an interesting contrast with that stuff that was being said earlier. This episode's great. I love it a lot. It's got me very excited to continue this show because, in case you couldn't notice, there are certain specific details about this curse and its impact on the story that I don't really recall from my first time through that this episode reminded me of, so I'm very much looking forward to re-experiencing that stuff and broadening my knowledge of this show. That said, what did you guys think of the Owl House episode 4, The Intruder, if you guys have seen it? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below or over on my Discord or my Tumblr. Links to both in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.